camera is so annoying. It doesn't look too yellow with this game, but if I'm playing with a white map game, it'll start showing some yellow tinge if I recall correctly. But the problem is it takes multiple steps to get it started. It charges weird, just all kind of stuff. It's a pretty good camera, other than that it doesn't work well for me. So we're entering 1917. Any reasonable person at this point probably would have conceded it's the Central Powers, but you know, I'm not really a reasonable person, especially when I'm playing solitaire. I kind of enjoy playing things out a little further, see how they do actually end. And it's not, you know, it's not like I've got an extra day left at Gettysburg on Terrible Swift Sword or something. This is something I can do within the range, I think, of a video. So let's draw the central event card, see what we got. It's not going to be anything good. The Red Baron. During air superiority phase, he gets an extra die for dogfights. Okay. And he just gets put on the card. There it is. Let's make some random person. I don't know. And as to what we're doing, we're really just trying to delay the end here. I don't have any exit that gets us to, you know, getting beyond the borders of Germany even. I'm kind of curious whether Germany itself is going to fall. The Germans launched attacks, mainly here in the Rhine, to little effect, but they did get rid of all of the British artillery. Well, they got them to commit it all, which is something of an effect. You don't really, you clear that out, it becomes a lot harder to take, to make the offensive. And they did a secondary attack over here at Belatovsk. Then they decided to stop. They had a few extra points left. Oh, they did the naval battle. They lost the naval battle this time. And, you know, when I went to the submarines, I got 2 hits against my subs because the Allies now have so many advantages on them. I bought those back rather than an extra unit, and I paid for the Austrians to be able to make attacks more effectively because I think the Austrians are going to do a fair amount there. That leads us, still no Allied air power, that leads us to synchronized machine guns. Germany gets an additional air superiority marker in any area containing at least 1 army. They get 2 dice in dogfights now. Yeah, because they have 2 counters. And yeah, nothing new there. This is just another layer, and let's get Ataturk out of there. And, see, this lets me win defensive rolls once. Is that enough to prevent the Allies from going in there? Yeah, I think it actually is. I'm going to throw a plane up here against the Russians to help as well. And that will get us to the Western Allies. I'll get their card, French mutinies. Now, this is the thing that can end the game in La Grande Guerre. It's not a card, it's just a fact of decreasing morale. When a French army loses a combat, France may make no further attacks this turn. They may not transfer production points this turn. So this is... I still want to make attacks, though, because this game is all about attrition. I'll tell you what the factor is. It's that you have a limitation on the number of attacks you can make. You can only make a number of attacks equal to the number of armies you have, basically. The trench attacks are the excess thing, which means you can almost always recuperate your entire force. I mean, if you focus on ground forces, you can entirely recuperate every single turn as long as there's no contributing factors like submarine warfare or something. Is that right? No. You can always, you can always bring back as many units as you have points, which means you can attack with more, but that doesn't necessarily bring the enemy down particularly more, because the attack system is the combat system favors the defender, as it should. But it feels like it favors it a little bit more in this game. At least that's the impression that I get when playing it, so I tend not to attack with more than I can replace. I'm not sure. It feels like there's never this real desire to attack with everything, and everything wouldn't be that much more than production, at least for the Germans. Very, very little effect by the Allies. The French and Allies launched an attack into Hanover. I don't know. Oh, I moved the British Army down. That's why I should have moved the French over to cover, but I did not. And because the French can't get very lucky, that attack petered out fairly quickly. The Germans didn't have to use up their artillery. Of course, there's a ton of Allied artillery here because it was all fired, so it recovers. Well, it doesn't make a difference. It recovers either way. Allied points spent on building up the army. The French could only spend here. I would like to send points to the Italians, but I'm like, well, it's better to fuel the English army, especially since I took a double submarine loss this time. Get my type card. P3, Royal Air Force created. We have no Ps, so we don't get that. This is the thing. You might never develop air power. I wish the air power cards were not sequential, to tell you the truth. It seems very likely that you'll develop one level of air power, and it's just too hard. It seems too unlikely that you'll get things in the right order. Of course, if you didn't have that kind of sequential aspect, you'd always be getting cards, which that also wouldn't be correct. It feels like the tech is going a little too slow overall here because of the luck of the draw or whatever. And that puts us to the US. We get a Brusilov offensive. Placed in a Russian-occupied area, re-roll dice for up to 2 attacks. If this combat captures a previously occupied area, Romania joins war, joins the Triple Entente. Yeah. Place card in next year's deck, so we get to have multiple Brusilov offensives. Cool. I gotta remember to do that. I hope I haven't screwed up other cards, but that one very clearly says that some of the others do not. Brusilov managed to take Prussia with his strike. And there are no trenches now, but things are looking so bleak for the Central. I don't know what we can talk about. I did builds for the Russians, which was basically their army, and the U.S. flips one more over and continues to wait. And that puts us on the final player, Allenby. The TE player places on British Army in the Near East. For the remainder of the game, when this army attacks with its combat by a +3 differential, the army is not spent, but may not attack again this turn. Okay. There he is. I prefer to put him in the Sinai because the supply situation in Basra is not good, and they're about equal distance, so why not? And, I don't know what we can do with the Austrians, but we will try our best to reduce the damage that's happening to Germany. And we finish up with the Central Power Allies actually punching their way into Italy using the mountain troops, etc. But I went really over-attacking with the Austrians. We also attacked into the Ukraine from both Romania and from Galicia, first from Galicia, with the thought of, let's create a threat that the Russians have to do something about, because, I don't know, maybe it's all we can do. I'm just not counting on us being around for much longer with anything. And that did not work, and I exceeded my production capacity. And that's something I don't like doing, because that weakens you defensively. And now, Galicia might fall here. It's not going to happen because there's too many Germans around. I can't afford to go on an expedition into Austria. I've got to beat the main enemy. So it's not that big a deal, and that's kind of the Austrian thinking eventually was, it just doesn't matter. We're not going to be in trouble that way. And that'll push us into the next season. Yeah, feeling pretty beat down from the trip to the dentist. But let's start off our summer turn. Now the game actually mentions these aren't 3 months each. So like summer is probably up to like 4 months, maybe a little longer. Spring and fall are on the longer end, and the winter is probably just a month or two. No, I've got that backwards. The winter is probably like 4 months or whatever. The summer is just a couple months. The idea being that more action is happening in some of the turns. So, it allows them to divide it up without, my brain's not working. Maybe I shouldn't even do this shit. I don't know. It's not like much is going to change in the world. Hindenburg Ludendorff team. Yeah. Roll an extra die in combat for up to 2 German attacks this turn from either Prussia or Posen, but not both. It's going to be kind of hard for me to remember, but okay. Well, since I'm not in Posen, I at least have some bonus there. I'll probably take advantage of that somehow. I don't know, other than a little bit of attrition into Prussia, I don't see how that's going to help me. Now I know why I hate this camera. There's a button you have to push, which starts it back up. It goes to sleep, essentially. It turns off completely. Now, I'm used to just opening the screen and the camera works. This one, I open the screen and I wait a little bit for the noise. And I wait 2 or 3 seconds and I realize it's not going to make the noise. And I look over to see what's wrong and I haven't pushed the damn button. Because the screen can't be the only factor in it. Because underneath the screen is where all the little cables connect to, which may be safer, may prevent some of the issues I had with some of the other cameras, but it's irritating as shit. It makes it hard to use. Anyway, what did the Germans do? They did not use the Ludendorff-Hindenburg card because they had an artillery that they moved into place and that was going to recharge. They're weakening their position in Poland in favor of Posen. They launched attacks into Belgium, just attrition attacks. Unlike the other games that I've played, attrition attacks actually make sense here. Because you're spending something that you're not losing. You're spending, I ended up having to rebuild a U-boat, so I didn't get as many points as I wanted. But you're spending points that you're going to lose no matter what. You need to cycle your reserves into the line. Now, there's a couple things to look at. Gameplay-wise, in terms of what it's generating, it's giving a reasonable end state and reasonable activity going on. A level of activity and a level of combat that's not excessive, because when conjoined with the fact that the attacks are probably less than historically effective in this, in some ways, in terms of the casualty proportions that you're seeing. So there may be a lot being abstracted here. In terms of the casualties proportions you're seeing, the attacker takes a lot more losses than the defender does. So in conjunction with that, it's not to your advantage to attack more than you kind of get for free, which means that's what you end up attacking, is this low level of war everywhere, except when you want to take a space, in which case, you can really beef it up and expend the chance, which all feels perfectly right. However, when you start digging into the concept behind that, that the casualty rates are too negative for the attacker, that that there is no for free in reality. That basically, men you didn't call up and armaments that you didn't assign to troops in 1 month or in one season are still available to you in another one in reality. It's not like you're throwing these guns and men into the ocean and saying, well, we didn't need those. So there's a lot that, like, in order to accomplish something that plays in a believable end state, the steps that get you there are unacceptable in a lot of ways. Doesn't mean it's not fun, and it's great to see something actually able to model the end result. And by end result, I don't mean, which side won or how the map looked at the end of the game or whatever. I mean, the output of the simulation, something that's managing to achieve the output of the simulation. But if you look at the works that are going on inside, it's kind of like, I don't really accept that. It's kind of like neural networks, where it's, you can't prove what's going on there. And if you look at what it is, it's like, well, it's not really modeling the decision. It's not really creating a model and making the decision out of any kind of adjustment of the model. It's this weird wiring mess that doesn't connect. And that's probably how the brain works, that just sort of gets you to the right answer. And then you think you understand a lot more than you actually probably do. Okay. Yeah, I wandered off in a weird way there, didn't I? Okay, that puts us to the Western Allies. Oh no, we still have to do the tech. I'm not in good shape here. We get a poison gas card for next turn. Cool. That may help a little bit. I mean, really, we're just looking at, let's hold out as long as we can. We've lost the game, probably the war. I mean, in any reasonable conception. One thing to note, I didn't send any money to the Austrians. One reason for that is they're a little beat up after the last turn. So I'm going to give them a recuperation turn. Of course, that gives Italy the time to build themselves up, but they're going to have some anyway. There's only so much I can do. Kind of interesting. I drew Italy joins the Triple Entente. Hey, didn't that happen already? What's going on here? Turns out there's 2 cards that enter Italy into the war, at least, and they both are in the same deck, so you're very likely to get Italy in the war, but they have slightly different effects. Now, I believe, I don't know if this gets, I think this gets just tossed out once drawn and implemented. Yeah, what if you can't resolve it? It is discarded without... Yeah, so I'm going to say that's a permanent discard, which means it doesn't get built back into next year's deck. But it's basically a failure for the Allies. I should have drawn it right away, and then I would have had to stop and go look for the card. All right. And the other thing is the camera takes a long time to get started when it does go down to sleep, whatever that is. Not a good action for the Allies. First of all, I forgot that I had been damaged in Baghdad, and I left this alone. And I probably attacked a little too hard because of that. For example, Allenby attacked in Sinai. The thing is, I don't want to spend 2 points for Baghdad. So I'm going to leave him like that and withdraw if attacked. Recovered from the German guerrilla warfare that keeps setting us back. We got hit twice by the submarine warfare. It's actually being pretty effective, which is why the Germans keep rebuilding it. We launched a pretty major attack into Hanover, though. As you can see, I mean, we damaged the Germans. They're going to have a few pieces left. They can do some attrition combat. Since I don't have trenches in Belgium, I pay a price. The trenches do slow the enemy down a little bit. Not terribly, but a little bit. And I was not able to rebuild all the losses that I took trying to inflict them on the Germans. But the thing is, I don't know. The Germans seem to be able to recover. They don't have very many armies, so whatever I pound they get back. But the hope is always that I'm going to be able to get the breakthrough, which is why I attacked as hard as I did. Let's draw a tech card for the Allies, and they get tanks. Tanks is not something they're eligible for because they don't have the A2 card yet. And it's still, well, no, it's 17, yeah. We should be seeing them soon. That puts us to the Eastern Allies. Let me draw. U.S. is still not in the war. They'll be building their last unit this turn. The Zimmerman telegram, this has no effect. It's U.S. entry only. And, you know, Russia's kind of built up, but it's not terribly worth hitting Poland. Wondering why I didn't build a German trench here. I mean, obviously I didn't build many units, but I didn't fill out all my units, or it was hard to do so. But that would be helpful. Once again, waiting for the camera to take effect, and it doesn't, because I forget the damn button. Someday I'll remember. I'm not in good shape today. Anyway, I finished this turn up with the Austrians doing some rebuilding. They got this von Straussen, I think it is, Strausenberg, who gives them a reroll option, kind of like the Inspired Leadership, but it's a singular guy. Other than that, I recovered some units just to prepare for an attack next turn. The Turks pushed the Brits out of back to Basra. They're going to get to rebuild now. I forgot about the Arab Spring or whatever it is, the Arab Revolt that happens there, but that's okay. It would have given me a reroll or an extra die or something. I can't remember what the fuck. An extra die on the attack in Jerusalem, which might have prevented this from happening, but fuck it. And U.S. Army is built. They still can't lend money yet, but they will be able to very shortly, and that will be incredibly helpful. And then they've got some armies, which once they get 3 armies into place or whatever, they might be able to do some value. I don't know where to put them, though. You know, they're certainly not worth slamming into Hanover. Unlike in the historical situation, I'm not feeling like I've got an exhausted Western Allies forces here. Really what the U.S. did troop-wise, I mean, obviously all the money and material that they pumped into the Western Allies was huge. But the troop-wise effect, the big deal was these were fresh troops that weren't sick of the war and ready to mutiny. And what you really had was, both on the French and German side, was the armies were just ground down to the point where it was hard to get them moving. It was hard to get them to do anything. And the English, not too much better. They had been in the war for years too. So the way to reflect that, there are many ways to reflect that, and I'm not seeing that that's going to be here in this game, but there's a chit that goes with a card. The Yanks are coming. Who knows what that's going to do? It might allow them to do something, that'll help a great deal and make them seem more impressive. But frankly, 3 armies is not going to be able to break through the trench lines, no matter what you do. It's just not going to be able to do it. So I don't think you'll have something like whatever, they were in a defensive position to begin with in the Marne offensive, which means, but eventually they were beginning to operate in offensives, and they can't coordinate with the Allies, so they can't break through the trenches in conjunction. All they can do is attrition at best, or if the Germans have lost enough armies, they can take something like Bavaria or something, but there's really not a whole hell of a lot they can do. On the other hand, down in Italy, they're about as big as the Italian army, and they can recover every turn and stuff like that. So that's pretty appealing to me. This had me a little floored and strangely, I tried last night, feeling a little better and getting back to my normal perverted sleeping schedule. I tried to start a couple different computer games. One of them crashed immediately. The other one's failing to download properly. So those would have kind of hindered me getting into this, getting back to this. But anyway, but it's a danger. I mean, I get sick and I'm like, well, I don't want to be up here playing a board game, dripping all over the board, whatever. Playing a computer game's easier. And then I'm hooked for a couple of weeks or whatever if that happens. Anyway, Brookmiller's Steel Rain. This is going to allow me to recharge one of my heavy artilleries. Great. But then also, I'll get a bonus technology. If I remember, the amount of cards that I have on the table is, especially since I'm walking away and everything, but it's beginning to get to the point where there's too much information there. There's too many pieces of information. It's beginning to feel like a civilization type game. The more complicated ones, like an ACIV, where you have all these different modifiers and cards sitting out there. I find that harder to cope with than other methods of displaying, technological changes or whatever. Anyway, I don't know what value there is where the Germans want to launch their attack. I can get an auto win if I get to Paris, but obviously I'm getting further and further from Paris. And on the other hand, the Russians are actually a threat, but I can't really afford to smack into those big armies. The interesting thing is, like here where I attacked in Belgium, I got to march in. Well, there's basically was nothing defending because there's no backup in the Somme, just the trenches. So I could conceivably, and did, succeed in perhaps taking the Somme. Now, we're allowed to do the none shall pass there. I don't think the Brits are allowed to do it. I think I have to do a French unit for that. You have to look real hard to find what the requirements are. This is why it's problematic. Defending in the nation's own home, only French can do it. Defending Paris, well, oh, that's an example, yeah. Okay, so the French can do it. They've already done one. They have one eliminated unit. So there's a -1. And they fail, which means we've fallen back to Paris. Now, if we had a second army, we could have actually taken Paris the same way. And it's not that extreme because you win ties and you don't spend the cost of attacking when you're hitting just trenches if you're successful. So that's why it's actually possible to gain this kind of ground. And you can make a really lightning strike once you destroy their army and send it reeling back. But you might not. It was definitely a push your luck type thing. But now the Allies are going to be faced with, there's a little bit more of a problem than we expected coming over there. Of course, because I only sent 2 units in, I don't have a real heavy force there, but I can dig in. I got some trenches to build. Sounds like a good plan, which I think means that I'm going to stop my advance here and not wear my army out more than it is, so that I can rebuild everything I can. CP has built most of their forces back up. A couple of trenches in the Somme. Remember, they can double entrench. We lost a sub. We left this unit unbuilt. There are definitely costs in place. Now, Bruckmüller gets us 2 cards. We're almost out of tech here. We get an A card, A3, the Strasstruppen. We actually can't get them because we don't have A2. Which means this card's done, right? Oh, this says only draw 1. I thought they always said draw 2 cards because that's what the rules say. So we'll draw 1 and we can't keep it. But now we draw our normal technology as well, which is Jagdstockpulls form. Germany gets an extra air superiority. I'm up to P3, and now, yeah, I get an extra air defense. I may want to put that sucker up in the Somme just to make it harder. The Allies really have to do something about that. And no big shock. Yep, poison gas was sitting out here. That didn't get run. That's a tech card that should be shuffled in. It's really hard with 2 cards and 3 cards to not keep track of which one's going to come up next. I shuffle and then randomize with a die roll, and that helps me lose track. But yep. Arms race. This is going to give a bonus technology if in a group that the Central Powers have the edge in. So like I could do it in aim for planes, which I don't know how much that's going to help me. I could aim for U-boats, but that probably I don't have available to me. So it looks like planes is the only one I'm going to have the option for. What are the Entente going to do? I don't know. I mean, they gotta push the CP back here. And because the units that are just knocked back are tired, all I had were pulling 2 fresh units into Paris. It wasn't sufficient. I did manage to blow through the trenches and hit a German unit, but I failed on the final attack to push them back. So the Germans are in place here for another assault, and worse than, that could end up ending the game. And worse than that, I can't reach Belgium, so I can't kind of cut them off there. I do still have a lot of combat capability back here, although I stripped some off, but I'm not going to probably be able to hit Hanover. I'm considering Bavaria. The Italians, well, they're pretty badly pressed, honestly. Things are actually starting to look kind of bad for the Western Allies, all of a sudden out of nowhere. The Allies are able to strengthen their position quite considerably. They're not going to lose Paris anymore. Whatever the Germans throw in here, it's not sufficient to take that. They took Bavaria, costing the Germans another army as they tried to prevent that. But there was still another attack left. So the Allies were able to pull into there. That's going to cost a couple of more resource points. It's really, once you start losing your production, I think you're pretty much doomed there. For the Western Allies, we get to draw 2 cards on the P card, because that's the only one which we can get. We do not get a P. And then we get our normal, which is P1 aerial reconnaissance. We'll be getting a card, and that means there are going to be dogfights finally. Where do we put that? I mean, Bavaria is almost certainly where the attack's going to be. I think we've got enough defenses. Ooh, crap, we forgot to defend Verdun. We're going to lose that. Yeah, we'll defend Bavaria. Oops. Yeah, these kind of maps do end up confusing me because I realize that things don't always connect. So I stop looking for things in quite as easy a way. I start discounting things that I think are going to connect more easily. Anyway, that puts us to the U.S. now, and the Russians. The Russians are quite potent at this point. The U.S. is going to start sending troops in. That makes Paris even less takeable. Let's draw and see what our event is. Exile of the Greek king. Salonika is not closed. Salonika was... Okay, I think this card has no effect because Greece is conquered. Yeah, once Greece is in the war, I think it has no effect whatsoever. So that will allow us to do the Allied with the Eastern Allies. I forgot to deal with the dogfight side. The phasing player has to determine how many they get. So the Allies now have one. Now, this is gone. But Yeah, so they roll 1 die in dogfight. The Germans are going to roll 3. I'll use just the white die. Germans also get an extra die. Okay, so we'll just use 1 die on its own for the Allies. And now we have to read this because they couldn't make it simple if they're going to blow it into a box. The highest value is its air interception. Okay, so this is going to be the air superiority value, which is 1. The air interception is a 6. They lose. The Allies actually do not get their airplane that they wanted to place, I guess. Even though it says it place it does get removed in this step, so I think it did get fixed there. And now back to our Eastern Allies. The Russians managed to make it into Posen. Actually, they should have made it to Berlin, but the Germans were able to roll a 6 on their None Shall Pass, and that's their last shot at it. But they did stop the Russians from taking it. They probably couldn't take it back well, they might have been able to. They have a lot of troops right near Berlin, so it could stretch out a little further. But, I mean, the game is actually really over here. The U.S. sent its force in, and tons of money to everyone. They can ship up to 9, no more than 4 to any one player. Well, everyone got bonuses off that. That's going to put us on the Central Powers non-Germans. And I'm sure this is not going to solve things. The Austro-Hungarian ethnic problem. Any attacks they make this turn are at a die roll of -1. Yeah. And we finish things off. A fairly massive attack by the Austrians coming into here. Now, Bohemia's open. That probably wasn't wise. Oops. So I can just march right into Vienna, but whatever. Fairly massive attack. Almost succeeded in pushing the Italians out of northern Italy, even with -2 penalties on us. Good enough die rolls happening. Turks took a chunk into Sinai. But that is the end of the fall of 17. I get to get rid of this card, which is just more problems. And yeah, we're up into another month. And let's see if I can remember to plug in my camera. It looks like the Germans indeed are going to fall. I mean, this threat, it was impressive. It might have been able to succeed. It didn't. The Germans have they got the mustard gas that allowed them to pull the poison gas card out. We're going to actually remember to use it this time. And gas cards may not have much effect. They have to happen on the first attack of the turn, and they're just a +1, right? Which, could be important, might not be, but there's no way of looking back and saying, did I use it correctly or did I screw up? So I'm going to try something a little bit daring again. I'm going to try to hit into the Rhineland, which might get me into both Bavaria and Verdun, and it might actually cut off some Allied units and destroy them. The idea of attacking the Russians looks impossible. I am still going to get a fair number of points back, especially if I can get my territories back and get the economic production from Bavaria back, as well as the Rhineland. But I am also back a few points, which is going to hurt. And there's not much I can do about that. So, thinking about making a last ditch, and here's the thing, you would never, this was not historically done, but in games you almost always do this kind of thing. A last ditch effort to try to cost some points to the Allies with a naval attack. One nice thing with more detailed games like La Grande Guerre is that they give the capacity for you to essentially reduce your fleets and make them unusable and pull troops and guns and ammunition or whatever off of them so that you no longer can use them, but they give you something that's not a high risk, high payoff type thing, just a little bit more grist for the mill. You're pulling Marines out and whatever, and it's just like, well, you know what? The Navy's not going to be able to sail under the condition it's in. It's just not ready anymore. Maybe there's a card that lets you flip the German fleet and get a replacement point for it or something like that. It seems like too big an effect comparatively, like being able to upgrade an army in exchange for the fleet reduction. In Le Grand Guerre, it's a smaller effect. I think you're able to upgrade a core unit or something, essentially off of it. I don't remember. But anyway, my hope is to kind of try to shake things up and give me another shot at Paris somehow. And it's not going to happen this turn. It's probably never going to happen because the U.S. is in now. The circumstances that led to that attack were sloppiness on the Allied part. But killing a couple of their armies would be awesome. Those German attacks came pretty damn close to taking the Rhineland. They fizzled out, though, and now not a lot of production. I also lost the Navy that I sent out, lost another sub, and this is all I could rebuild through some trenches down in Berlin. You know, this is the point where, if not before this, where Germany recognizes we cannot win the war any longer and surrenders historically. Of course, that happened, you know, a year later, but because the game doesn't have a more generic mechanism, but instead says, yep, the game ends here, and if the Central Powers have not done so well at that point, it's just over. You know, well, it's not just over, it's they lose, and if they do better than that, they win, neither of which really makes sense. That's not what the war was decided on. It wasn't decided on the territory that was gained. It was decided on the fact that the Central Powers army could no longer stand up. It could no longer hold the field. The chances to defeat, say, the French army, the mutinies, whatever, those passed and were gone. And the French army was resilient enough and strengthened by American troops and everything that it was pretty clear that no advance was going to be made after Die Kaiserschlacht and whatever, after the counteroffensives by the Allies. At this point, it is hopeless for the, well, by the end of time, at this point, it is hopeless for the Central Powers, and they would surrender. And that's the thing that's not, you know, covered. Now, obviously, a player would probably say, I can concede now, you know, but I don't do that. I play things out to the bitter end, because to me, that's what the game's defined as. You could make a reasonable argument for a concession would make a lot of sense right now. But anyway, you know, this was the Kaiser's battle, essentially, this shot at Paris where the where the Entente left things too open. Yeah, I should probably be calling it I don't think another circumstance like that's going to come up after this attack here, but you know, you never know, right? Plus, I haven't finished the turn, therefore we're not in the position to call it. So we have what? We have, how does he die? I don't know how he dies. There may be a rule on it, but I don't remember there being one. I thought he dies through doubles or something. That should be on the card. Okay. So we built the forces, and we get the tech advance, which is just a single card this time, and it's planned barrages. I believe that gives us what? An additional heavy artillery for Germany. Well, that's probably going to go in Berlin, I guess. It just doesn't matter of. And, you know, we're probably going to see Allied attacks coming over here rather than an attempt to kill right away. And then the next thing is... This had something else on it, didn't it? Roll 3 dice when attacking if air superiority mark. Oh, shit, I forgot about that. Yeah, so that just came into effect. And I have to remember that when attacking with artillery support, if I have an air unit, I can fly it and get a third die instead of just the 2 dice. Now that I'm at A2, that the Allies don't have that yet. So now, what am I doing? I'm doing the air superiority, and we have 3 versus 1. Actually, we have 4 versus 1. So here are the 4, and we get a 6. And the 1 is a 1. So we get all our planes. I'm not sure. Pretty sure they're not going to go where they are. Let's put 1 up there because Berlin is so important. And again, you know, I mean, we've abandoned Belgium. I should put a control marker there because there's an unimportant garrison, i.e. one that you just spend to go in on. And then in the Somme, that's barely defensible. And did a Western Allied event. Mine exploded. Place on this card. Is that this? No. I don't know where the fuck it is. There it is. Okay. Any Western Allied combat phase, I can place this marker in a CP area containing a trench. On the first attack, I flip the trench to its breach side. Oh, before I flip the trench to the breach side. Okay, so we get a bonus attack there. Oh, we made successful attacks as far as Belgium. The Western Allies were not strong enough to keep pushing after that into Hanover. We recovered our forces, built some trenches, all that U.S. money in play. Some of that U.S. money got funneled through France and into Italy. Italy built 2 more units, or rebuilt their units. We rebuilt one of the navies that the Germans knocked out. We're pretty well off there. We get a tech, and it's the RAF, which we're not strong enough to have. So again, we get to roll to see how many planes we get to deploy, and it looks like we might actually get to deploy our plane. Okay, we do not, but I think the Red Baron shot down. That's not noted on here, so I'm going to have to look at the dogfight rolls to find that crap. Because I seem to remember something. The Red Baron. Okay. If the Western Allies roll doubles, well, they can't. Okay. So, yeah. So they can't shoot the Red Baron down. And he's probably racking up good numbers at this point. The Allies need to get another level of technology for that to happen. And that puts us here. And this is okay that that's there. That's to be reshuffled in next year. Yeah. National Defense Act, USA entry +3. Yeah, well, that doesn't matter. Okay, and we get to start their turn. Oh, one thing to note, the U.S. was able to be pulled along with that offensive. They couldn't actually get involved in it, but they can advance with it. It's an important facet. And we'll see if the Ruskies can take Berlin this turn. It looks quite likely. And I forgot to charge up my artillery. How about that? And not a lot happened. The Russians failed completely. Cover that trench line. And they devoted everything there. In fact, they're bypassing Poland, which is kind of an interesting facet. That's something you probably wouldn't see in most games. Now, what you wouldn't see an empty, so in more detailed games, you wouldn't see an empty Poland, but it's not empty. There's a garrison force there, and it's a force that's sufficient that a whole army would be required to take it. You know, given that it makes more sense to bypass it. It can trace supply. It's really no big deal. The Germans could throw troops in there and cause all kinds of problems because of it, say striking into Prussia, but they just don't have enough. They could put at most 2 forces into Poland. That would allow them to maybe attack Prussia, and then they could get into Lithuania or whatever. That would cut these guys off, that means no more recuperation, but they can fight their way out of the bag, you know? So it looks like a way to waste a couple of units in the end and probably make it so the Allies can cut through instead. That puts it on the Central Allies finally, and that'll be the end of the year. I have to figure out, this has gone about an hour. I may do one short video for 18, or geez, I really should just surrender. Central Power Starvation, place in Berlin. CP production, Austria-Hungary, +1 PP. What? German production, -2 PP. Is this buying like grain off the Austrians or something? Certainly doesn't sound good. And the Germans lose points overall. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the Austrians think they can do at this point. They have a fair-sized army, but there's Americans beginning to show up in Italy. Can't figure out what to do with the Americans. Everywhere where they could be placed, I mean, I could conglomerate them, but they just don't have enough oomph with 3 pieces to break through any line at this point. It's kind of the problem. They actually probably would be best off, say, in Bavaria, thrusting their way, you know, to finish off the Austrians, and then maybe hook up with the Russians who they can work with directly. Yeah, I think there was a rule against that, like that they can't actually cooperate in the same attack, but I don't know. It certainly would be hard usually, but it might actually work well. And I guess that's about it. And the Austrians almost make it into northern Italy, but not quite able to, which they're able to recover somewhat. That's, you know, they lost their leader though. They're covering Bohemia just to prevent any kind of sneaking in. They don't have enough points to maintain more than this army running anyway. Turks, of course, continuing to attempt whatever the hell they do. Yeah, I mean, I should be surrendering here. And the questions are, do I go to another video? Do I shuffle in, do I stay on this video and go into 1918? Because it's quite possible it's going to end. You know, I mean, first of all, there's only 4 turns left, or 3 turns left. It's quite possible it's going to end, not in the next turn, but in the turn after. So I think I actually have to go to another video if I'm going to continue going, and I think I should, because this way I can shuffle in the additional event cards and we can see a few of those as well. It is a hopeless situation, however, there's no question of that. And, you know, any reasonable player would be surrendering. Anybody trying to role-play the situation would say, you know what, Germany would surrender here. But I do kind of like to look at what the additional cards are, and it's not like I've got something prepped and ready to go. I've got something, but I haven't read the rules yet. Of course, I could be reading the rules instead of playing this. Probably won't. Probably end up having a break or going to something really simple after this.